Open economy. We are in the last lecture, last lesson. I have two chapters again for presenting you. This is the I planned actually to give you the chapter 33 and 35th also, but it's not available. Online is not very fast, and we try to do as much as possible theoretical part with some applications. Let's go to the open economy. As you know, in macroeconomics, we are dealing with the open and closed economy, but the open economy especially concentrated to the liberal economical approach, and we are always in the open economical applications. And open economy has meant you are having some international transactions, you are having some trade relations, some monetary transactions with the other nations. And closed economy is the opposite of this. There is no export, no import, no capital flows, no monetary transactions, no trade relations between the governments and between the institutions and companies and firms. An open economy really create international transactions between the countries and nations. When we are concentrating to the Keynesian economics and Keynesian expenditure model, the closed economy, if you remember the GDP, so-called the components of the GDP, which is the C plus I plus G plus NX. Here in closed economy, we don't have the NX, which is the net export, no importation, no exportation, as I have defined you. In closed economy, we are just like in the North Korea. We don't have any deal with the other nations. Of course, in North Korea, there are some transactions between China and a little bit with the Japan, but in closed economy, in real closed economy, you don't have any transactions. Totally closed with the other nations and other international transactions, neither trade relations nor monetary transactions realized. And open economy, as I mentioned to you, is included the NX, so-called the export, import, trade relations, and some other monetary transactions, which is very important to contribute and enlarge the economical activities in the international economical aspects. As we did in the former classes, international economies contributing to the country's welfare, and the nations, governments profit from this international relations via tax, tariff, and other non-tariff measures. Open economy interacts with other countries in two ways. It buys and sells goods and services in world products markets, and it buys and sells capital assets in the world financial markets. As I mentioned, the monetary transactions realized in the second part, and the good markets is in the first part. The open economy is, we are always constantly in the United States, is very large and open, and we are using the imports, exports, huge quantities of goods and services is transacted and traded between the nations, and it is contributing to the welfare. As you are remembering in our last class that we have introduced to you the international trade relations and the impact to the economies, you observe some tariff applications. Sometimes tariff is also contributing to enlarge the domestic production, but also welfare somehow a little bit reduced, but at least is balanced and maintained in the desired level, because if you are having some international transactions, you are enlarging your domestic production and you are creating some sustainable economical applications, because if you don't have international transactions, some periods of time, maybe the demand capacity is becoming reduced or sometimes is becoming increased, and this will then affect the prices, the goods and services prices, the product prices so-called, and this will then negatively affects the inflation and the whole economy, because as I mentioned to you, inflation is very important parameter, and changing the whole economical aspects and the whole economical applications and may damage the sustainable economical maintenance. The past 4 decades, international trade and finance have become increasingly important in the United States, as it is stated here, and it is contributing and enlarging the economies. As you know, the international economy, especially after the Second World War, enlarged and increased, results of this globalization, especially in the era of Reagan and Thatcher. In the 80s, it is becoming very popular and enlarged and increased, but currently you are observing we are having some recessionary period, results of this negative effects of the so-called pandemics and the globalization, which is expand and enlarge the disease to the other nations and create some problem to the supply side of the economy and reduce the international transactions and the transportations between the nations and reduce the trade capacity. This is somehow a recessionary period during this pandemic period, and it is not good for the large size companies where they are enlarging and increasing their profit via international transactions and international trade. When we are looking to this net export and the affection to the economy, we are understanding export and import are becoming very important, and export are the goods and services that's produced domestically and sold in abroad, and import are goods and services that are produced abroad and sold domestically. We are importing some goods which we don't have in our countries, or we have some less or scarcity in the production in our domestic markets, and we prefer to import from other countries. For example, we are importing coffee beans, banana, and some other products, oil, and gas, and some other products which we are not producing here, and some industrial products, and then exporting some agricultural products such as fruit, citrus fruits and olive oil, cheese, and these kind of products that we are producing domestically will be exported, because we are having abundantly these products in our markets, in our country, in our island. But if we don't have the other products, then we are preferring to import from other nations, because we are requiring this for maintaining our existence and our welfare. If you don't have the electricity, and if you don't have any gas and oil in your resources, you can extract it. Maybe we have in the oil and gas, natural gas, especially in the southern part, it is already founded, and it is not extracted actually, but mostly it is imported to our country for using the electricity, for using the heater and the other transportations and vehicles required for the domestic market, and the products, the agricultural products that we are exporting are bringing some capital to our country. And this difference, if it is export is less than import as a monetary value, as a capital amount, as a resource, then this will then create some problem to the economy, because we are always trying to increase and enlarge the exportation of the goods and services and reduce the importation of the goods and services, because if you are having too much export and if you are having less import, it's bringing some capital to the country. But if you are having too much import and less export, then this will then cause some capital transfer to the other nations, and this is then reducing the resources and transferring the monetary transactions to the other destinations, and it is not good for the economy. And most of these transactions, which is realized via trade and other activities, is realized with the international currencies such as dollar, euro, And UK pound, as you know, in your country, either it is like this, especially in Nigeria and some other countries. As I said to you, in China, the yuan is also not very popular international transaction currency. It is used mostly domestically, and it is not well accepted in the international transactions. Therefore, they are also having their reserves in dollar and in euro, and this is then somehow creating problem because they are continuously buying some dollar and putting into the reserve because they are in need to use these international currencies for their let's say trade relations and other transactions, and this is then affecting the domestic currency negatively. It's creating more problem and depreciating the domestic currency and appreciating the foreign currency. And these things, as you are understanding, not good for the emerging economies because they are having problem results of these difficulties and insufficiencies in the economy. The net export, as I said to you, is the value of the nation's export minus imports. And if it is positive, then we suppose we are having some surplus in the economy as a current value, as a capital amount. And if it is negative, then we are having some deficit in the economy, and it's not good. And if it is equal, the trade net export is equal, then is or zero, then trade balance is realized as it is supposed to be fine for the economy. And trade deficit, as I said to you, is the net export negative because you are having too much import and less export. As it is indicated here, imports is more than exports, and this is then causing negativities to the economy. And the trade surplus is the situation in which net exports are positive, where the export is higher than imports. And trade balance supposed to be export and imports is becoming equal, and this is then supposed is zero, the difference between export and import, and then trade balance or balance of trade is becoming equal. The factors affecting net export is also important. The taste of consumers for domestic and foreign goods, taste and the preferences, as I mentioned to you, we are all preferring some products in the market and consuming. And if we don't like some products and we don't like to consume it sufficiently, then the product will become reduced in the market and will become smaller in the production operation process. And if the product is very well demanded and the taste is good and everybody wants to consume, then it becomes popular and the consumption creates more production, and then this will then transfer too much profit and enlarge the market in this sector and in this production. The exchange rate at which people can use domestic currency to buy foreign currencies is also important. Domestic currencies to buy foreign currencies affecting the economies, as I said to you, because when you are using such currency transfers from domestic to the foreign, then this will then create problem to the economy. The domestic currency will depreciate and reduce its effects to the economy, and it's not good. Factors affecting the net export, the incomes of the consumers at home and abroad. If you don't have sufficient capital and salary and income in your pocket, then your consumption is reduced, and the cost of transporting goods from country to country is becoming important in this direction. And the policies of the government towards international trade, if the government determine, for example, a higher tariff amount to the imported goods, this will then reduce the importation of the goods. But if there is some, let's say, exemptions and preferences to the importations of some goods, which is contributing to this import, then this will then enlarge the international trade towards to the domestic market, or the opposite also possible if you are exporting to the other destinations and the destination country reducing the tax, then you will get easily access to this market and become more profit and enlarge your market in these destinations and in these markets. And cost of transportation is also important, as it is written here, but currently this transportation cost, if you are taking international economics from me, you will see the transportation cost effects to the economy, which is currently excluded from the agenda, because if you are including the distance and transportation costs to the production operation process, to the trade relations, this will damage and reduce the market and affects the market capacity negatively. Therefore, the transportation cost and without transportation cost analyze is in the third year topic, and you will understand how it is affecting and changing. But from this point of view, the cost of transportation, I may say, is not important in the global market, especially in current days. You are observing the most of the multinational companies having some distributors and having some, let's say, production operation process in different destinations and different markets, and this will then reduce the market. If you are exporting to the Asia, then you are probably approaching the market and the, let's say, factory to the Asian countries, and this will then reduce this transportation cost. Or in the vice versa, if you are in the European Union, then you are having some, let's say, factory or company, especially in the Iron Curtain countries, the so-called Central Eastern European countries, the Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Slovenia. These countries are very popular. Bratislava, especially the city, having the most of the German factories there, and they are having these lower, let's say, labor and employee, because in the Central European countries, the employee and the wages are very low comparing to the Western part. And this is then the reason most of the countries in the European countries, especially the larger countries, Germany and some other, Italy, maybe France, and some created some other destinations and producing and transferring their companies and factories to these cheaper locations for maintaining their profit and enlarging and increasing their market capacity. Therefore, transportation cost is somehow is eliminated, because they are having different destinations and different locations and different production places, and this is then somehow is neglected because it is not good for the economy. And the internationalization, when we are looking to this export graphic and import, you are observing this is then going from 1950 to the 2000 almost on the same level, because it is better to having some trade balance when the export and import is somehow near to the values. And if the import is enlarged and increased, as you are observing, especially in the 80s, as I mentioned to you, the globalization period affected this importation to the US economy, to the US markets, and results of this globalization and neoliberalism, so-called, increase the importation and reduce the exportation, as you are observing on the graphic, because America was one of the important global marketer and the producer until 80s and then 90s, but it is still, you are observing, in 2000 the Chinese economies affected global market. India, so-called the bridge countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, becomes more popular, the emerging markets, the emerging economies, and creating some pressure to the US economy and US traders. And this is then the reason why these political problems and the issues becomes very important in the international market and international relations, because currently the US economy is not the only so-called rival in the market, or the UK, but the Germany, but the eastern part of the world is also in the leading position. You know, the China is in the second. India is also very popular. Brazil also. These are the emerging economies. Russia also, because Brazil, Russia, India, China, as I said to you, and then mixed countries, Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea or South Africa, and Turkey are also very popular exporters and trade partner in the global market currently. And these are the leading countries in the international markets, and it is important for the sharing the cake, so-called, and this is then not welcomed from the developed nations, because the cake is becoming smaller for them, and that's the reason most of the hurdles and problems and political or some other issues in the Middle East and in some other regions exploded, so-called. Net capital outflow refers to the purchase of foreign asset by domestic residents minus the purchase of domestic assets by foreigners, which is very important. Net capital outflow, and there is also net capital inflow. If the capital goes out, then it is net capital outflow is realized, because the purchase of the foreign asset by the domestic residents minus the purchase of the domestic asset by foreigners becomes negative, and the opposite is then the net capital inflow, which is then the capital coming to your domestic market. And the let's say in the United States, resident buy the stock in the Toyota Corporation, and Mexico buy stock in the Ford Motor Corporation. This is then somehow is the transferring the capital from one destination to the other realized. And when a US resident buys stock in Telemex, the Mexican phone company, the purchase rises US net capital outflow. As you are reading this, then it is very popular to increase and enlarge the capital outflow if you are buying. And then when Japanese residents buy a bond issued by the United States government, the purchase reduces the US net capital outflow. In such relations, must be balanced bilaterally for maintaining the economical activities. Otherwise, the one party becomes neglected and one party becomes negatively affected. And the international transactions and international trade relations, it is always win-win policy. In the game theory is also very popular. The rivals must become better off. Not one is better off and the other one is worse. It should be bilaterally supporting each other's, and the win-win policy is always increasing the trade relations and the trade capitals. And as you are observing here, if the bilateral agreements and relations realize, one company and one, let's say, country will become affected negatively. Variables which affects the net capital outflow: the real interest rate being paid on foreign assets. The real interest rate is the nominal interest rate minus inflation. And if it is positive, then it is positive. If it is negative, then it is negative. The real interest rate being paid on the domestic assets, and the perceived economic and political risk on holding assets abroad, and the government policies that affects foreign ownership of domestic assets. The net export and the net capital outflow are closely linked, as you are understanding from the former slides. The economy as a whole, the net export and the net capital outflow must balance each other, which means the net export is supposed to be something, then it should be equal to the net capital outflow, which will then create some balance to the economy. And this holds true because every transaction that affects one side must also affect the other side by the same amount, because, as I said to you, net export is coming to you or going from you, and net capital outflow or inflow is also bilaterally affecting the economy. And if it is positive, then it is expected that the net capital output is positive, then this is then supposed to be the net export is also positive because something is coming to you. But if the net capital outflow is negative, then the net capital outflow is going out, then the net export is supposed to be negative, and then the import is higher. This means then the capital going to the other destinations, and vice versa is realized for the positive NX or net capital inflow, so-called. The next export components is the Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX, which is the consumption, investment, governmental expenditure, and net export, as we exercise in the Keynesian application. And the national saving is the income of the nation that left after paying the current consumption and government purchases. And as we have done this in the former chapters, the national saving is the Y minus C plus G, Y minus C minus G, which is the investment plus NX. And the national saving is Y minus C plus G minus G, which is the total output minus consumption minus governmental expenditure or spending, is the national saving. And national saving has two components, as you remember, the private saving and the public saving that we have done in the former lectures. Therefore, here supposed to be the saving, the national saving is also equal to the investment plus net export. Or the saving is equal to domestic investment plus net capital outflow, as I have mentioned to you, because net capital output or outflow is then equal to the net export. Is outflow is negative, then the net export is also negative, because this means the importation is higher than the exportation, and this is then causing some capital outflow to the other destination, and therefore there is a negativity, and this is then balancing each other. The current account, when we are looking to the current account, which is also part of the current account, is represented in the NX or net export, but plus we are using some other transactions, other capital than you are going to see now. The current account is an important indicator of an economy's health. It is defined as the sum of the balance of trade, goods and services, export minus import, so-called the net export, and net income from abroad and net current transfers. A positive current account balance indicates the nation is a net lender to the rest of the world, while negative current account balance indicates that it is a net borrower from the rest of the world. A current account surplus increases nation's net foreign asset by the amount of the surplus, and the current account deficit decreases it by the amount, as I have mentioned to you in the former slides. And it is represented as in the formula NX plus NY plus NCT, which is the NX is the export minus import, NY is the net income from abroad, and NCT is the net current transfers. And as you are observing, current account is expected to be negative because you are having always more importation than export. You are having usually the net income from abroad, unfortunately, negative, and net capital transfers is also negative, and most countries exercising the current account deficit in this direction, negative, and some countries having some positive account. But this is, as I mentioned to you, not easy to balance this, because many countries having trade relations, and current account deficit is not a big issue for the countries. If the amount of the current account or the percentage is very high, then it is creating problem to the economy, but it is somehow not too much, then it can be maintained. The current account, as I said to you, is the net NX plus NI plus NT, net export plus net income and net transfers. And then if we are having the simplest table here, then you are observing here for the United States for the balance sheet in 2017. The account is given here, the export, import, and the trade balance is supposed to be 552,277, and received from foreigners is supposed to be the net transfer, so-called, is the income received from the primary 928.118 and income received from the secondary 154.049. Summation is the subtotal received is the 1,000,082.167 and paid to foreigners is the net incomes. The income payments primarily 706.386 and income payments secondary is 272.645 and in summation 979.0.31. And if you are getting collect and sum up this, then you are observing the net export is negative here. The trade balance, there is a deficit because export is less than import, and the received from the foreigners is primarily is somehow contributing, and the incomes is also contributing. Therefore, we are having here the transfers, which is going to be to the foreigners is 979.031. Then when you are adding this all together, NX and NI is negative as you are observing in the table. Therefore, this will be then subtract from the incomes, which it brings here somehow 449.141 deficit or current account deficit to the economy, because there is a negativity in the economy because net export and the net incomes are altogether negative, and it is higher than the net transfer, and this is then causing some problem to the economy because received incomes is less than the total net export and foreign paid incomes or the payments to the foreigners is altogether making a considerable higher amount than net incomes received from the foreigners. If you have any question about the table, let me explain again. If not, then I'm jumping to the next. Then this is given here, the domestic investment as you are observing, and the below is the national saving. And as I said to you, since S is equal to I, so-called the national saving is supposed to be equal to the national investment, because as much money you are saving is going to transfer to the investments. And from this point of view, it is expected to become equal, but sometimes this is, as you are observing, the borrowing capital, which is used for the investment, is more than the saving capital, and results of this, the FDI investments or some domestic resources can be used in the market and will then enlarge and increase the investment amount, and this is then causing some problem because the capital used in the real economy and in the investment for the realizing some production operation process and the entrepreneurship is more than the saving capital, and this is then not good for the economy. And as you are observing here again, after the 80s, this is enlarged and increased because the foreign transfers and foreign capital is enlarged and increased towards to the US economy, and results of this some deficits observed and some differences observed between the domestic investment and national saving. The blue areas representing the differences. Sometimes it goes to down, these investments, and saving capital becomes a little bit more, especially in the 60s to 70s. Then it goes to negative, and some periods after the 80s, it becomes negative. Investment is always higher than the saving. It is expected to be equal. And net capital outflow we are observing here, it is going down and decreasing because always results of this net export, the negativity and the current account deficit, creating these transfers. Because as I mentioned to you, if you are having more import, then you have to pay more capital to the others, and this is then the capital outflow to the countries, to the other destinations, and this then goes to the other markets and other countries, and this is not good. And when we are looking to the international transactions influenced by the international prices, the two most important international prices are the nominal X rate and the real X rate. As I mentioned to you, the nominal and real values is very important for estimating and determining the economical calculations and evaluations. And here we are using either nominal X rate and real X rate in the economy. And nominal X rate is the rate at which person can trade the currency of one country for the currency of another. Results of this trade with the currency value, which is the current value. And the nominal X rate is expressed in two ways: in units of foreign currency per $1, which is used mostly in the emerging economies, and in units of US dollar per 1 unit of the foreign currency is supposed to be estimated. Assume the exchange rate between the Japan yen and the US dollar is 80 yen to $1, then the $1 trades for 80 yen. This is how it is estimated, very simply. Then 1/80 is then 0.0125 of dollar is the 1 yen is supposed to be represented. And then the appreciation refers to an increase in the value of currency as measured by the amount of foreign currency it can buy. And depreciation refers to the decrease in the value of currency as measured by the amount of foreign currency it can buy. As I have mentioned to you several times, the appreciation is very important for the currencies, and we are preferring to appreciate the currency. If currencies continuously depreciate, then the exchange rates, the foreign currencies become more appreciated, and the inflation in the market is very heavily affecting and changing the value of the domestic currency, and this is not good for the economy. And if dollar buys more foreign currency, there is an appreciation of the dollar. If you go to France with your naira and with your Turkish lira and you buy and shop much more than you are expecting in your country, then this means your currency is appreciated. If you go to France, for example, and buy less and you can survive with your currency, then this means your currency is not good, your currency is depreciated. Or similarly, if dollar buys more foreign currency, there is an appreciation. If the vice versa realize, if the dollar buy less foreign currency, then there is depreciation. Real exchange rate is the rate at which a person can trade goods and services one country for goods and services to another. This is then the love of the one price is affecting and changing the market, and you are comparing the amount of the goods and services you are buying with your currency. This will then help you to understand the real exchange rate. You talk about, for example, naira, and if you buy 1 naira 1 bread, and in Turkey you buy 2 Turkish lira 1 bread, but the X rate differences is almost 0.50, then you mean it is then the same, because if you are getting in the let's say Nigeria $400 or 400 naira, and in Cyprus you are getting 800 Turkish lira, let's say a simplest expression or example, then you are understanding there is no differences between the countries' purchasing power, parity. And this is how it is affecting the real exchange rate. The real exchange rate compares the price of the domestic goods and foreign goods in the domestic economy. And if a German beer is twice as expensive as American beer, the real exchange rate is 1/2. 1/2 case of German beer per case of American beer, as I mentioned to you. Now you are calculating and estimating the amount that you are buying. This is very important example, and this is very easily explaining and letting you to understand this real exchange rate, because you are talking about the amount of the products that you are able to buy in the other destinations. The real exchange rate depends on the nominal exchange rate and the price of the goods in two countries measured in local currencies, and the real exchange rate is estimated nominal exchange rate multiplied with the domestic price dividing to the foreign price. This is the simplest value, or as I mentioned to you, you can calculate with the simplest estimation as it is given in the numbers of the product you are buying. The real exchange rate is the key determinant of how much country export and imports realize. And depreciation or fall in the United States real exchange rate means the US goods have become cheaper relative foreign goods. This is the reason the devaluation and the inflation always used in the international markets as a domestic market depreciation or the currency value devaluation. And this will then propose to enlarge and increase the, for example, Nigerian products in the Germany, because if Naira becomes cheaper and becomes devaluated, devaluation means you are reducing the value of the currency and it becomes somehow cheaper to the German people, or vice versa. If German euro or United States dollar is depreciated, this means the Nigerian people or the Turkish people will enjoy to buy these products with cheaper prices, which is unfortunately not observed in our markets. We are always having depreciated currency and we are not able to buy the importation and imported goods and imported services because our currency is continuously depreciated and inflation reduces its value, and the exchange rate always affecting our welfare and reducing our market capacity, and this is not good. This encourages consumers both at home and abroad to buy more US goods and fewer goods from other countries, as mentioned to you. And as a result, US export rise and the US imports falls. That's the reason many countries, as I said to you, using this devaluation and the inflation for accelerating and increasing their export capacity and reduce its importation, because you are observing here, if the Cadbury chocolate becomes 20 Turkish lira, nobody probably will prefer to buy. But the Turkish products, Eti or Ülker or some other domestic products, or in the Nigeria, Milo, popular chocolate and powder product in the market, will become very popular. Instead of buying some Nestle or Cadbury or Milka international trademark goods and services, then will be reduced and will be cut from the domestic market. And similarly, your products which you are producing will become very cheaper if you are exporting to the Germany or to the United States. They are enjoying to buy 4 pieces instead of buying 1 piece of Cadbury. They are buying 4 pieces of chocolate, 100-gram chocolate, 400-gram chocolate with this Cadbury, which is going to be sold for $2 or $3 or €2 in Germany. Conversely, an appreciation of the US real exchange rate means the US goods have become more expensive compared to foreign goods. So the US net export is expected to fall. But I have to remind you, this is unfortunately not a realistic approach. In many studies, I have also some studies regarding to this devaluating currency and enlarging the market and export, is not very well adapted, because for the short run, you may accelerate some trade capacity, but it is not affecting heavily the international market. You become poorer than ever, and the consumers will not able to increase their welfare, because devaluating currency and inflation has also meant resource transfer from domestic consumers to the domestic producers, and this is somehow capitalist approach, and it is not good for the economy, because maintaining such a policy, such a inflationary policy, and devaluating currency and letting and hoping the foreigners enjoy to buy and come to your country for shopping and for other reasons, this is not very realistic approach, because we are using foreign energy which you as an input, we are using foreign inputs such as coffee beans. We are buying the coffee beans and creating less coffee, instant coffee, or some other coffees. And this is not a realistic approach. This only for a short period of time can be counted and accepted, but in the long run, this is affecting the economy. And from the other side of the uh, problem, when we are looking, the countries, as I said to you, international transactions realize always with the foreign currencies. And when you are using dollar to buy some imported, let's say electricity or gas or oil or some other imported goods, then this is also becomes very expensive because your currency becomes cheaper and you have to buy more with more naira or with more Turkish lira, some dollars, and this is not good for the economy because this is somehow reducing the ability of the economy for enlarging and increasing its trade capacity, because neither the production will become cheaper because you are using foreign currency, and foreign inputs, which is bought with the foreign currency, and this is somehow not good for the economy. You are exercising problems because your production capacity will become expensive since you are using foreign inputs, electricity, oil, and some others. And also your consumers will not able to buy too much products because your products will become maybe cheaper, but most of the products which is going to be produced with the foreign inputs will become also expensive, and in the long run this will then affect the welfare loss for the consumers and increase some problems to the other side of the economy, to the producers either. Therefore, it is not good for having continuously inflation and depreciated currency in the market. It is better to have some reasonable price and reasonable inflation in the market. Let's say 1 point or 2 points, 2%, not that much. If it is 10%, 20%, 30% inflation in the market, this is not good for the economy. It is creating problem and is not acceptable. Purchasing power parity, as I mentioned to you, simplest and most widely accepted theory explains the variation of currency exchange rates. And the purchasing power parity is the so-called theory of one law, theory of the one price. So-called, you are calculating everything with one-to-one estimations, and is the exchange rate whereby a unit of any given currency should be able to buy the same quantity of good in all countries. That's the logic for maintaining this purchasing power parity in this direction, not the value of the currency, but the counting or the capacity of this currency for buying some goods. If in Ukraine they are having $100 per month, but with this $100 they can maintain their existence without any problem. And if you are in the Germany, you are having 1,000 euro, but you can only survive with the limited, let's say, goods and services, then this is somehow the similar, let's say, living standards exist between this $1,000 earned worker and $100 worked Ukraine employee. Therefore, this purchasing power parity, which is based on the one-to-one estimation of the purchasing capacity between the countries, will helping him to understand the people's welfare. Because we are hearing in China, in Ukraine, in let's say India, in Pakistan, in Turkey, they are getting $200, some $300, and trying to survive, but they are able to maintain their existence with this money because the prices probably is cheap, or the purchasing power is similar as in the Germany or is in Nigeria or some other countries, and therefore these differences and disparities between the countries can be maintained without any problem. Because if you are shifting the price higher level, then you have to give the employee higher wages and higher salaries, and this is the reason in Germany they are getting $1,000, at least 800 euro per month minimum payments for existence for their living costs, but as I mentioned to you, with this money, they are only surviving. And this is the reason in many countries, in developed nations, they are having the electricity expensive, they are having the transportation, maybe the products you are buying here with 10 Turkish lira, maybe the good quality, or 15 Turkish lira, good quality bread. But in maybe Germany, you have to buy with 50 Turkish lira this bread. That's the reason. The disparities then is giving you the information that this is then you have to multiply this minimum wage in Cyprus and then calculate in Germany, then determine whether it is better off to live in Germany or in Cyprus. This is how it is estimated. You are hearing they are having too much money, but how they are surviving, because living costs may be very high and very expensive in Germany or in the Austria or in other European nations, but in the, let's say, Nigeria or in Pakistan or in Ukraine or in China, they are having lower cost of living, and this will then help them to survive with this $300 or $200. The purchasing power parity theory, a unit of any given currency should be able to buy the same quantity of good in all countries, as I said to you. And the theory of purchasing power parity is based on the principle of law of one price. As I said to you, law of one price is dependent to the similar quantity of product should be bought in the different destinations, and this will then helping hand for understanding the real exchange rate impact to the economy. And according to the law of the one price, a good must sell for the same price in all locations, or at least in the same amount. If the law of one price were not true, unexploited profit opportunities would exist. The process of taking advantage of differences in prices in different markets is called arbitrage. This is how it is. You buy something cheaper and you go to the other destination or to the other season, then you sell it and you get these differences as a commissionary arbitrage. And this is then very popular, used in the economy. If arbitrage occurs, eventually prices that differed in two markets would necessarily converge. And according to the theory of purchasing power parity, a currency must have the same purchasing power in all countries, and exchange rate move to ensure that. If the purchasing power of the dollar is always the same at home and abroad, then the exchange rate cannot be changed. And the nominal exchange rate between the currency of two countries must reflect the different price levels in those countries. And when the central bank prints large quantities of money, the money loses value both in terms of the goods and services, and it can buy, and in terms of the amount of other currencies it can buy. Therefore, printing money is also creating problem to the economy. Here is given in 1920 to 1925, the money supply you are observing here is very high. Printed money results of this, then the hyperinflation realized in Germany also. This was probably the last experience, and then they stopped this. The price level went very high up, and they required much money to buy these products, and this was the reason they printed that much money. Unfortunately, currently we are using this monetary easing or quantitative easing, as I have mentioned in the former lecture, and this is also somehow covering this and replace this money print issue and removed from the agenda. When some money is printed, that the collected amount of the capital and the banknotes in the market should be called to the central bank or to the banking sector, then the replaced with the old banknotes with the new ones. Otherwise, if you are having the money and the banknotes in the system and you are printing money and distributing, then this is then causing some inflation and causing some hyperinflation to the economy. Is not good. Many goods are not easily traded or shipped from one country to another, and tradable goods are not always perfect substitutes when they are produced in different countries, because there is no need to do this. And the summary goes like this. The exports are the value of the domestic goods and the services sold abroad minus the value of foreign goods and services sold domestically. And net capital outflow is the acquisition of foreign assets by domestic residents minus the acquisition of domestic assets by foreigners. And economy net capital outflow always equals its net export, as mentioned. And economy saving can be used to either finance investment at home or to buy assets abroad. And the nominal exchange rate is the real relative price of the currency of two countries. And the real exchange rate is the relative price of goods and services of two countries. As you see here, the goods and services are considered, and above is only the price of the two currency is considered. The nominal exchange rate can also dollar buy more for foreign currency. The dollar is said to be appreciated or strength. If it is the opposite, then it's depreciated. If buys more, then it's appreciated. If buy less, then it is depreciated. And the theory of purchasing power, as I said, is the law of the one price based on the law of the one price theory and approach. And nominal exchange rate between the currencies of two countries should reflect the country's price level in those countries. And this was the first part of the lecture. Now I'm going to the second part for the application, and then finish this period, this semester. Let me upload. If you have any question, ask me. If not, then I will go to the next part of the presentation. Do you have any question? No question. No question.
Yes.
Now I have the application a little bit quickly. I will upload and go through. The Keynesian again. Model will be introduced to you quickly. The marginal propensity of saving, marginal propensity of consumption will be introduced to you, and its impact to the economy, how it is realized and analyzed. Let me change this structure. I'm trying to remove this. It is not working currently. Okay, now it's good. Okay. The expenditure output model, the Keynesian application I'm going to give you. The Keynesian expenditure output model is, as you know, C plus I plus G plus NX. The open economy application is introduced to you. And as you remembering, the GDP is the amount of the goods and services which is produced in the economy. And the Keynesian cost diagram present in a figure which will be given to you in a short period. The horizontal axis represents the measure of output and the aggregate expenditures, and the vertical axis measures the spending. As you are observing here, the output is on the x-axis and the aggregate expenditure is on the y-axis. And here you are having the 45 degrees so-called aggregate expenditure equals to the potential GDP and output, and you are supposing to be below this 45 is the aggregate expenditure is high, and above this equilibrium point where the real GDP is realized, there is more less aggregate expenditure and more supposed to be the expected output. The real GDP on the horizontal axis is the measure of output and aggregate expenditure on the vertical, as I mentioned to you, and the expenditure output diagram is represented on this graphic, and the aggregate expenditure output model shows aggregate expenditure on the vertical axis and the real GDP on the horizontal axis. A vertical line shows the potential GDP where full employment is occurred, and at Y P supposed to be is the real GDP in the economy is realized. Equilibrium position is supposed to be equal to the aggregate expenditure to the real GDP, and the potential GDP, if it is on the right side, is good for the economy, and if it is in the left side, it is then requires some enlargement and increase to the economy. The 45-degree lines shows all points where aggregate expenditure and output are equal. As I said to you, bilaterally, the expenditure and output is equally distributed, and aggregate expenditure schedule shows how total spending or aggregate expenditure increase as output or real GDP rises, and the intersection of the aggregate expenditure schedule on the 45-degree line will be the equilibrium realized where it is intersect each other, this aggregate expenditure and real GDP. And equilibrium occurs, as I said to you, where it is equally realized. And remembering the GDP can be in several equivalent ways. It measures both spending on final goods and services and expenditures, and all sales of the final goods and services that makes up GDP will eventually end up as income of workers, for workers, for managers, and for investors and owners of firms. And the sum of all the income received from contributing resources to the GDP is called national income. And at some points in the discussion, the follows, it will be used to refer to the real GDP as national income. Both axes are measured in real inflation-adjusted terms. And in the diagram, the 45-degree line shows the set of the points where the level of aggregate expenditure in the economy measured on the vertical axis is equal to the level of output or national income in the economy measured by the GDP on the horizontal axis, as I have explained to you in the beginning of the graphic. And line that stretch up the 45-degree angle represents the set of points 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and so on, where the measurement on the vertical axis is equal to the measurement of the horizontal. And the first is the vertical line showing the level of potential GDP, and the potential GDP means the same thing here, that it measures, or it means the aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram. It refers to the quantity of output that the economy can produce with full employment of its labor and physical capital realized. And if it is, as I said to you, in the right side, is then preferred. When the macroeconomy is in equilibrium, it must be true that the aggregate expenditure in the economy are equal to the real GDP, because by definition, GDP is the measure of what is spent on final sales of the goods and services in the economy. And equilibrium calculated as the aggregate expenditure to the real GDP, where intersects to the 45 degrees line. And thus the equilibrium calculated with the Keynesian cross diagram will always end up where aggregate expenditure and output are equal, which will occur only along the 45-degree line. and will show the equilibrium for the economy because it is the point where aggregate expenditure is equal to the real GDP. Thus, the thinking of these components on the aggregate expenditure line, consumption, investment, governmental spending, export, and in imports, so-called the net export, the key question is how expenditure in each category will adjust as national income is the y is equal to c plus I plus g plus nx is subjected, and every additional, let's say, components will shift this curve, this curve, which is intersect the 45-degree diagram, so-called the equal aggregate expenditure, aggregate real GDP diagram. Then aggregate expenditure, so-called the produced goods and services, is becoming higher and higher. The aggregate expenditure line will become higher if you are adding the consumption, the investment, and the governmental expenditures to this graphic. Then this aggregate expenditure line will become shifted to the upper level, and the equilibrium will be shifted to the higher level. Therefore, the potential GDP will be realized and enlarged to the right side, and there will be no deficit in this representation. And then we are coming to the marginal propensity of consumption and marginal propensity of saving. How the consumption expenditures increase as nations' income rises. People can do two things with their income: consume or save. Therefore, we are using here the marginal propensity of consumption and marginal propensity of saving. And the marginal propensity of consumption gives you the consumption part of the salary or the income, and marginal propensity of saving giving you the saving part of your salary. So-called marginal propensity of consumption plus marginal propensity of saving is supposed to become 1 or equal to 1. And this has meant if you have $1, how many percentage of this dollar is going to be distributed or consumed by ordinary consumer, and how many percentage of this dollar is going to be saved. This is the marginal propensity of the dollar, or $1 is distributed in the marginal propensities. The marginal propensity to consume is the share of the additional dollar of income a person decides to devote to consumption expenditures, and marginal propensity to save is the share of the additional dollar a person decides to save. It must always hold true that is marginal propensity of consumption and marginal propensity of saving is equal to 1, which means $1 is going to be distributed between this. If the marginal propensity of consumption is 0.70, then marginal propensity of saving is supposed to be 0.30. Therefore, if marginal propensity of consumption is 0.50, then marginal propensity of saving is supposed to be 0.50 either. Or marginal propensity of consumption is 0.90, then marginal propensity of saving is supposed to be 0.10. Therefore, when we are looking to the graphical illustration again here, the consumption graphic and the consumption equation is given here. The x-axis represent the output and y-axis represent the consumption amount. And here, when you are looking to this delta C over delta Y, which is the differentiation of these two graphic, as it is given in the consumption equation, where it is A plus BY is represented, and B is here the propensity, so-called delta C over delta Y. And then when we are calculating this, then this will then gives you the slope of this consumption function, where it is very popular for estimating the linear equations. And as you are observing, A is the intercept in given example. If you are having any problem with these interpretations, please let me remind and refresh you or repeat again, because I suppose you are understanding and going faster because we are having limited time for finishing this chapter and this application. If you have any question, please ask me. Factors that determine the marginal propensity to consume. It is for sure the income level. If you are having higher income, then this will then increase and enlarge your income. At low income level, an increase in income is likely to see a high marginal propensity to consumption, and this will then probably enlarge and increase also the saving capital either. This is because people on low incomes have many goods and services because they don't have too much money to consume, and results of this, they are increasing and enlarging their consumption. And if you are having high level income and very much capacity of consumption, then this will then enlarge and increase bilaterally the consumption and also the saving. And temporary, permanent is also affecting and changing the marginal propensity to consume. If people receive bonus, then this will then affect positively. Then they may be more inclined to save, and this temporarily rise its income, isn't it? Because bonus is somehow is a contribution to your income. And if they gain a permanent increase in income, then they may have greater confidence to spend either. And interest rate, a higher interest rate may encourage also saving rather than consumption, or vice versa. If there is a lower interest rate, then this will then promote consumption, because you don't want to save because you are not getting too much money when you are putting the capital into the saving account. Therefore, this kind of problems affecting and changing the propensities in the economy. And consumption confidence, sorry. If confidence is high, this will encourage people to spend, because you are trusting the speculations, no speculation, nothing happens, and then you feel secured, and you start to enlarge and increase your consumption because you have, let's say, regular income, and you feel secured, and you may maintain your consumption without any problem. And if people are pessimistic, expectations, unemployment, such as recession, as we are observing here in the pandemic, then this will then negatively affect either the consumptions and also the saving capitals. For example, if the marginal propensity to consume out of the marginal amount of income earned is 0.9, then the marginal propensity to save is 0.1. With this relationship in mind, consider the relationship among income, consumption, and saving shown as it is in the figure. Note that we use aggregate expenditure on the vertical line, and all consumption expenditures are part of the aggregate expenditures. As you see here, it is started from some intercept, so-called, let's say, 500, and it goes towards to the 10,000 aggregate expenditures. Then the consumption function is given C is equal to 600 plus 0.8y, and then the intercept here is, as you are seeing on the equation, is 600, and it goes linear equation because the consumption, marginal propensity of consumption, so-called the slope, is 0.8. And regarding to this slope, then we are representing the consumption function without problem, because if you are giving some numbers to the y, you get c, and if you give some to c, then you will get y. Then you can illustrate this graphic without any problem. An assumption commonly made in this model is that even if income was zero, people would have to consume something. Therefore, this is the reason zero income is also have some intercept value, which is 600 is given here. And an income of 4,000 total consumption will be the 600 that will be consumed even without any income. And then this is supposed to be 4,000 multiplied by the marginal propensity to consume, which is 3.200, so-called the 3,200, and for a total of 3.800 is realized if you are putting to the numbers to the given propensity value. Then this will then help you to understand how it is distributed. You are understanding? No question?
Yes.
The marginal propensity to consume measures the proportion of extra income that is spent on consumption. For example, if an individual gain an extra $10 or 10 pound and spends 7.50, the marginal propensity to consume will be 7.5, because delta C over delta Y is going to be represented here, and 7.5 divided to 10 is 0.70. Therefore, marginal propensity to consumption is 0.75, and the marginal propensity for saving is supposed to be 0.25. Will invariable be between 0 and 1? And as I said to you, since the marginal propensity of consumption is delta C over delta Y, and we are understanding that the marginal propensity plus marginal propensity of saving is equal to 1, then since the marginal propensity of saving is, marginal propensity of consumption is 0.75, then the marginal propensity of saving is also 0.725. Therefore, it is equal to 1, and then the given example can be used for estimating the both propensities. Marginal propensity to consume greater than 1, it is possible that consumers could have a marginal propensity to consume of greater than. If income increased $10 or €10 in certain circumstances, they may increase spending by 11. They finance the extra spending by borrowing. Therefore, more likely is a fall in income of £10 doesn't cause a fall in spending because people need maintain certain spending patterns known as autonomous consumption, which I have mentioned to you with this 600 intercept amount. The average propensity to consume is then the consumption over income. Now we are removing this differentiation. Just consumption, total consumption to income is used for average propensity to consumption. The multiplier effect, when we are looking to the multiplier effect, is the 1 over 1 minus marginal propensity to consumption is giving us the multiplier. And the multiplier states that an injection into the circular flow, government spending or investment can lead to a bigger final increase in the real GDP. This is because the initial injection leads to knock-on effects and further rounds of spending. The marginal propensity to consume will determine the size of the multipliers, and the higher of the marginal propensity of consumption, the greater the multiplier effect will be, as you are observing here. This will then positively affect and increase the multiplier. And if the multiplier, also called the marginal propensity of consumption, is 0, then there will be no multiplier effect because this is not possible. And if it is given here, if the government pursue expansionary fiscal policy, higher so-called governmental expenditures, but consumption confidence is very low, then there will be a high potential propensity to save and a low marginal propensity to consumption. And this will limit the effectiveness of the fiscal policy because the injection will lead to only limited increase in spending and aggregate demand. This is a little bit difficult for you, I know, but I am giving you for those who are interested to know how it is affecting and changing the economy. And marginal propensity to consumption and tax cuts. One important issue regarding to the marginal propensity to consumption is the impact of the tax cuts. This is directly the same as you are increasing in the tax. This will then affect the consumption capacity of the person. Therefore, the marginal propensity of consumption is negatively affected from the tax. You have to know this at least. If the government wish to pursue expansionary fiscal policy, they may cut the higher rate of the income tax, 45% on income over, let's say, £150,000 is supposed to be subjected to the tax. However, the marginal propensity of consumption is likely to be low at this income level. However, if the income tax threshold is increased, there is likely to be a greater economic stimulus because at those income level, the marginal propensity of consumption is higher. The propensity to consumption or to consume and save, the marginal propensity to save is the ratio of the change in total saving to change in total income that brought it about and is expressed in the marginal propensity to saving is delta S over delta Y, which means the differentiation of the saving divided to the differentiation of the output or the capital, the total output. Capital. Marginal propensity of saving is represented here with the equation S is equal to minus A plus 1 minus BY, because this is the other part of the equation, because marginal propensity of saving plus marginal propensity of consumption is equal to 1. Therefore, if it is A plus B, then 1 minus B. If A is the marginal propensity of consumption, then 1 minus B then will become marginal propensity of saving. And here we are representing the graphic, which is again linear, and the intercept is minus A, starting from the negative and goes to the up and intersect the Y in any reasonable price, which is not given here. And this will then gives you the propensity where it is delta S over delta Y. This is the application. And if it is given to you in the numbers, then you can use easily this formula where it is also the slope of this curve, because delta S over delta Y is the slope of this saving equation either. The marginal propensity to saving, the proportion we save is known as our marginal propensity to save, and it is found by dividing the change in the saving by the change in the disposable income, so-called the capital that you are using for your purchasing, the salary. For example, if we receive $10 an hour raise and we spend $9 of it and save $1, then our marginal propensity is supposed to be 0.1. Delta S over delta I is supposed to be 1 over 10, which is 0.1. And the marginal propensity consumption plus marginal propensity saving is always equal to 1. Then the marginal propensity to consumption is supposed to be 0.9, as I have mentioned to you from the former explanations. Then here is given to you marginal propensity to save example. The income is started with 0 and goes to 20, 35, 48, 66, and the consumption is $8, 27, 28, 36, 49, and the saving, as you are observing here, when it is $20 income is received and 27 consumption, there will be a negative saving, and 0 saving is not possible. Minus 7 is supposed to be, can be consumed because there is a higher consumption than income. And when it is 35 income increased, then it is becoming 7 because the consumption is 28. When it is going to be 48, it goes to be 36, then the difference is 12. Then the marginal propensity saving, as I said to you, the delta S over delta Y, then you are getting this differentiation and dividing to the differentiation. As you are understanding, S1 minus the first consumption differences will be subtracted from the former one and divided to the income differences as it is given here. This will be 0.0, 0.05, 0.93. This is then the equation and calculation delta S over delta Y, which means you are getting the differentiation of the 20 minus 0, then 35 minus 20, and you are going to difference this minus 7 minus 8 will be then divided to the differentiation of this income, which is going to make 0 consumption because saving capital is 0 is not possible. And then when we are coming here, the marginal propensity of consumption plus marginal propensity of saving is equal to 1. Then delta Y is equal to delta C plus delta S. This is then the differentiated. Then delta Y over delta Y is then delta C over delta Y, delta S over delta Y, which means marginal propensity of consumption plus marginal propensity of saving is equal to 1, and marginal propensity of saving is equal to, if you want to replace the 1 and minus marginal propensity of saving to the other side of the equation, then this will then gives you marginal propensity of saving is equal to 1 minus marginal propensity of saving. And if it is marginal propensity of saving 0.75, then this will then means marginal propensity of saving is 0.25. Moreover, since Y is equal to C plus S, where it is I also possible because saving is equal to I, we have Y over Y equal to C over Y plus S over Y. Consumption over output, saving over output, and the Y over Y, which is the output over output, is 1. then you're going to get again the average propensity of consumption plus average propensity of saving is equal to 1 again. And from this point of view, we are moving to the average calculation or estimation of these propensities. The average propensity to saving is the ratio of the total saving and the total income, and it is expressing the average propensity of saving is supposed to be saving equal to output, which we don't differentiate it for the calculation. And at the break-even level of income, y is equal to c, and s is supposed to be 0. And since the whole income is consumed, then there will be no saving, isn't it? Therefore, average propensity of consumption will be c over y is equal to 1, and average propensity of saving is equal to 0 because saving is 0. And 0, when you divide something into the 0, then of course 0. And again, average propensity of consumption plus average propensity of saving is equal to 1, as it is given in the marginal propensities. And then here it is given the national income, 400, 800, 1200, 1600, it goes like this. And plant consumption is 300, 600, 900. As you see, 300, 300, it is increased, and 400, 400, it is increased, the consumption and the income. And the plant saving is minus 300, minus 200, because as you see, the consumption is more than in income, or so-called the salary. Therefore, you are subtracting each other and you're getting this savings. And average propensity for consumption is getting this consumption divided to the output as it is given here. Then you will get 1.5, 1.13. If you don't understand this, you ask me. This is similar as we did in the production cost. And average propensity for saving similarly realized as saving divided to the y. And delta y change in the saving, you are going to subtract each other and you calculate it. But here it is given 400 because you are getting always 400, 400, 400. As you see, national income is increased, and delta consumption is 300, 300. It is 300 increase the consumption. As you see, 300, 600, 900. Always 300 increase and upgrade it and enlarge. Therefore, we are having the same differences. And for the delta S is again 100, 100, 100 is changing the delta saving. You see 300 minus 200 is 100, 200 minus 100 is 100. Again, it goes like this. And you see the delta S is also 100, 100, 100. It goes, and marginal propensity for consumption then becomes unique, 0.75. And marginal propensity for saving becomes again delta S over delta Y, then becomes 0.25 regarding to this delta Y, delta C, and delta S applications. Did you get these calculations easily, or do you want me to explain a little bit more? Is that okay for you?
Sorry, can you elaborate more?
What am I? Shall I have to repeat, or you understand?
Yes, little clarification.
I didn't get you. Do you want me to repeat it, or is it okay?
A little bit.
Repeat.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, national income here is, as you see, increase 400 plus 400 is 800. 800 plus 400 is 1200, isn't it? You got this?
Yes, yes.
Then the change is delta Y. When you go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 column, you got delta Y, 400, isn't it? Did you get it?
Yeah.
Then delta Y is always 400, no problem. Then we're coming to the consumption. The plant consumption is 300, then it goes to 600, it goes to 900, always 300, 300, again increase. Then the difference, delta C, is again 600 minus 300 is 300, 900 minus 300, 600 is 300. Therefore, delta C also, when you go to the seventh column, there is also 300, 300, 300, because this is the differentiation, the difference between the consumptions, always 300. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. It's fine.
Then we are going to the third column. The plant saving is 300, 200, minus 200, of course, minus 100, 0, plus 100, 200. It goes like this. And when you are going to the eighth column, this differentiation, or the difference between these two savings, is always 100 again, because minus 200 minus 300 is, of course, positive. Then it gives you 100. You understand? Therefore, always 100, 100, 100 goes. You got it? the delta is 8 column is also 100.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Then we come to the marginal propensity, and the average propensity of consumption is only consumption divided to saving. You are dividing the, for example, what is consumption is 600. You are dividing to 400 is 1.50. Is okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
No,
sir.
I get it.
It goes like this. And when you are going to the average propensity for saving, then saving divided to the output, therefore 200 divided to the 400, then it gives you minus 50. It goes like this also for the rest. Is that clear? For the fourth and fifth column.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay, then when we are coming to the marginal propensity of consumption, then we are using for the marginal propensity of consumption, the column 7 will be divided to the 6. Okay, 300 divided to the 400. Okay, and this gives you 0.74, 75 for, sorry, for the all, because there is 400 and 300 for all. Okay.
Okay.
And then we are coming to the last 10 column, marginal propensity for saving, delta S over delta Y. This means you are going to divide the 8 column to the 6, which means 100 will be divided to the 400 is going to give you 0.24, because 1 over 4 is, or 100 over 400 is 0.25. Okay, did you get it?
Yes, sir, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I'm jumping to this graphic. This is then the illustration of the graphical from these given tables. Of course, here we don't have the numbers, and I can explain you very clearly. But you are understanding there is again the intersection point starting from the 45 degrees. This is then the aggregate demand, and aggregate output is supposed to be equal to the real output. And if it is above the realized output where it is intersecting, you see there is a 5, y is 10 and y is 5. If this is intersect, then we are having here the equilibrium. If the planned output is on the right side, then we have to realize more for enlarging it. If it is on the left side, then there is probably not sufficient realized output in a given economy. We are achieving more with this model. The graphic is not very clearly illustrated, but I have explained these graphics to you in the former slides. That's why I don't spend more time, because this is only the representation of the given calculations, which is not very properly put the numbers, everything that you may probably understand better, but roughly it is represented. And when we are coming to the investment and interest rate, the marginal efficiency of capital states the rate of return on an investment project. Especially, it refers to the annual percentage yield output earned by the last additional unit of capital. If the marginal efficiency of capital was 5 and the interest rate 4%, then it was borrowing 4% to get an expected increase in the output 5, and effective profit margin of 1%. As I said to you, because of this nominal and real values and the inflation will then calculate it and estimate it here. And the investment here is equal to A minus B. R here is the real interest rate. And as it is given here, the marginal efficiency of capital is the B here. And when you are estimating, and when you want to estimate this, then this will then easily estimate it by using this differentiation between this investment and interest rate, where it is giving you the marginal efficiency of capital, delta interest rate and delta investment. If interest rate rise from 5 to 7, then we get a fall in the quantity of investment from 100 to 80. If the interest rate increase, then it will tend to discourage investment, because investment has a higher opportunity cost, and with higher rates, it is more expensive to borrow money from the bank, because higher interest rate will reduce the people desire to borrow something, because you are lending some money or you're getting some credit for creating something, and this is then how it is reduce the interest investment capacity in this case. And with higher interest rate or real interest rate, it is more expensive to borrow money, as I mentioned to you, and saving money in bank gives higher rate of returns. For sure, we are enjoying to save if the interest rate is high, but we borrow less if it is high interest rate. Therefore, using saving to finance investment has an opportunity cost of lower interest rate is stated. And assuming inflation is 0 and interest rate is 5, then the investment project would need an expected rate of return of less or least greater than 5, because there will be a real interest rate here 5%, because here there is no inflation in the economy, and the interest rate or the nominal interest rate minus inflation is 0. 5 minus 0 is 5. Then the real interest rate will then generate 5%, as it is mentioned here. If interest rate is 7, then the any investment project will need an expected rate of return of the least greater than 7. Then there is probably less investment realized in this case. And real interest rate and investment for firms, they will consider the real interest rate, which equals nominal interest rate minus inflation, as I mentioned to you. And if it is higher, then this is good. This will generate some interest. And if it is negative, then there will be the real interest rate negative, because nominal interest rate will be less than inflation, and this will then cause some capital loss for the economy. And here is given an example. Inflation is 10% and the nominal interest rate is 9. We have negative real interest rate 1%, as I mentioned to you, because 9 minus 9 interest rate minus inflation is 10. 9 minus 10 is minus 1, and this will then create a negative interest rate, so-called real interest rate. And this will then has also meant real interest rate will generate at the end of the maturity date, let's say in 2 years or in 1 year, your capital will become less valued. Maybe generate some capital, but as a currency value, as a monetary value, but as a purchasing power parity, it will become lower value. This means if you are buying in this year with, let's say, $1,000, let's say 10 something X product, after a year you will buy some 9 product or 8 product with this $1,000 or Turkish lira. This means the purchasing capacity will become less. It's not good. Similarly, if it is generates 10% interest, it will becomes 1,100 Turkish lira, but the purchasing capacity will become reduced because the inflation reduce its value, and the generated capital and interest is not sufficient to cover its loss. And results of this loss, your capital will not able to buy the same amount of goods as it is bought in the last year. That's the reason why the real interest rate is important to estimate. And if inflation is 4 and the nominal interest rate is 6, we have real interest rate 2%, which is positive now. Then you are expecting in 2 years or in 1 year, if it is the interest rate is 2 and the inflation is stay intact, then you will generate some 2% real interest rate, which is contributed to your capital as a value is going to be increase and enlarge your value. And the elasticity of demand for the investment, as I mentioned to you, elasticity is also very important in the economy. In the former lectures we mentioned, and the demand for the investment is affected from the elasticity, but not too much, because it is not the only parameter. Interest rates are one of the important determinants for the investment, but not the only. As I said, technology, economic growth, the willingness of the bank to lend, and accelerator theory, and some other factors affecting and changing the investment capacity. Therefore, people's desire is not only affected from this demand elasticity or elasticity of demand for the investment, and this is somehow causing liquidity trap. Lower interest rate may have little effect on the boosting the level of investment. Therefore, demand for investment becomes very interest inelastic. It is not affecting and changing the investment capacity if the demand is inelastic in this case. As you are seeing here, there is an inelastic capital represented on the graphic. The interest rate is not affecting too much this capital. As you see, the investment amount is not very heavily. If it is more horizontal, this has meant the investment capacity is heavily affected from interest rate. But as I mentioned to you, beside of interest, too many other factors, growth rate, the economical growth, the technology, and some other factors affecting and changing the capital and investment amount. And here you are seeing there is more vertical line, which has meant is not affected from the interest. The investment is not heavily affected from the interest, which has become more horizontal. Then this will then affect and change the investment, because this will then shift investment very higher level. You are shifting the interest rate from 5 to 0.5, but the investment demand elasticity is very inelastic, as you see here, and it is only shifted the investment from 97 to 95, 99. But if this, let's say, vertical line becomes or would become more flatter and more horizontal, probably this interest rate, which is reduced from 5 to 0.5, very heavily affect and increase the investment from 97 to 150 maybe. But as I mentioned to you, in this case, because of the demand inelastic, demand is inelastic for the investment to the interest rate, is affecting less and negatively, or few amount of affection can be observed on this case. This was the class. I did some accelerated and very quickly. We didn't do too much calculation. Unfortunately, some calculations we have done, and in the exam, I will try to become loyal to you and do as much as we have done some applications, but mostly theoretical representations and calculations will be given to you. Beside of this, maybe 60% theoretical applications and estimations will be asked to you. Maybe 30 to 40% application and calculation will be in the exam, and this will be enough, I think, for you to do this class without any problem. During this period of time that you have your exam, you can anytime communicate with me via email or WhatsApp, or I don't know, if you have a mobile, you can call me to ask something. I can come to the screen and help you questions, answering your problems. If you don't have anything, I can finish this class. Yes, please.
Yeah, please, when are we doing our revision?
Our revision, as I said to you, we have done some 11, 12 chapters, and revision in 1 hour is not possible. In the universities, I never do such revisions, because revision need to refresh you, flash back to the old topics, and this is somehow not easy. But as I said to you, I can help you. You can communicate me, you direct me your question, then I reply you via email or WhatsApp. You write me, then I will answer you as much as I am getting you. Is that okay?
Okay, sir.
Because revision needs longer time. Yes, please.
Yeah, I understand. But you can tell us like the area of concentration, like the chapter we should concentrate more. Like the chapter that is important to you very well, so we can concentrate on that very well.
Well, you should learn the chapters. You go to YouTube and listen this uh, videos, and then read some book. Read the book. If you don't get me easily, read this point from the book. If you don't understand, then ask me. I don't know what kind of directions can I give you if I am telling you study the supply demand or the Keynesian economics. This will then restrict you. And if I am asking something else, you told us you didn't ask this. This is somehow read your PowerPoints. I have also uploaded PowerPoints, and there is also videos in the YouTube, as I said to you, Ergin Fikri Akalpler. You can listen these videos and download these PowerPoints and see the PowerPoints. And also there is also a book if you want to get better knowledge and understanding. This will also available, but I don't know what kind of direction and information can give you to study. You should study the chapters, the GDP, growth rate, inflation, Keynesian components of the GDP. There are too many things. How I'm going to tell you, this part must be more concentrated. This is not possible. You study the chapters as much as you can. I am trying to ask you some. I don't like memorized questions. You are understanding? I don't like memory questions. I don't like to give you some direct questions and direct theoretical expressional definitions. Maybe some few, but not too much. I want to see whether you are understanding this knowledge, this macroeconomical aspect or not. This is somehow how it is going to be. I will give you some sentence and ask you some question about what is, I mean, I will not ask you directly what is nominal, let's say, interest rate, but I will put into the example and you will suggest this is nominal interest rate. Or I will not ask you what is love of one price, but I will put you in an example and then you will understand this is used for the purchasing power parity. What is purchasing power parity is not going to be asked you, but is going to be interpreted in the example that you will understand it. You get me?
Okay, sir. I understand.
Okay,
Thank
then I wish you all the best for your future and for the exam, and I will do my best for you because we are online, and I will consider your assignments as much as possible with the best, because as I have already done in the first one, all students who submitted the assignment, I rewarded with 10 points. I will also do for the second also. Okay, don't worry.
sir.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you,
If
sir.
you don't have any question, then I will stop this video.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good luck and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.